Welcome! Today we're looking at the Wayfarer Foothills, going over some memories of this map for the open world, one of the starter maps in the game. The footage was submitted by TechZoon. Many thanks to them for that. And we'll see how map completion goes. Amazingly, we're actually starting by not doing the beginner areas. We're immediately running north from 0% completion. This is a technique I've never really used. But today I want to talk about some of the things that I've experienced with this map over the years, particularly how it draws to Guild Wars 1. As we do a new heart here. This heart did not exist when the game originally came out. They deleted a heart and then they added a new one, and this is the new one. The idea being that you're meant to carry these bags to the norn without the rabbits being able to grab you. Oh god, I have to try and suppress a sneeze while talking here. I've always kind of liked this, but I've not done it much, just because it is sort of new, and by the time it was released, most of the characters I wanted to take through map completion I'd already done so. But yeah, this is a cool map for Guild Wars 1. Why? Well, in kind of a weird way, we've seen with all the other starter maps that there's several places they intersect with locations from the original game. So, Caledon Forest intersected with some Eye of the North locations where we were dealing with the threat of the destroyers and were populated with dinosaurs. But in the north, intersected with White Mantle territory from the Prophecies campaign. And it was, you know, a really bizarre mix. With Queensdale, it intersected with a ton of Crichton maps from the original game that felt vast and huge, and then in the sequel felt really kind of small. This map hardly intersects with anything at all. No, seriously, that means that throughout this video, everything you're watching when you're playing in the Wayfarer Foothills is not a Guild Wars 1 location. This takes place, here's on the map, you can see, in a section of the Shiver Peaks that was basically not traversable whatsoever. Which is kind of amazing because in the original game, honestly, a lot of the first campaign was Shiver Peaks. You know, they actually had so much Shiver Peak exploration in the original game that they split it into two separate kind of major regions, the northern Shiver Peaks and the southern Shiver Peaks. And while we are slightly too far to the east to overlap with anything from the first game. Now, you'll notice at the very top of the map here, we do overlap with one of the last Ascalon areas as you leave Ascalon. But that's actually only overlapping with the town of Cragstead, which technically isn't a part of Wayfarer Foothills. That was added with Living World Season 1 later and is its own separate instance. And when you're in Cragstead, it certainly doesn't feel anything like that Guild Wars 1 map. And again, it's one of those things where, you know, Cragstead is a lot smaller than that full explorable was in the original. So yeah, there's pretty much no overlap. Here you just saw we managed to grab the Hero Challenge taking place back in the tutorial area. This is probably my favorite of how they integrate a tutorial area into the main map, because it feels so seamless and immersive and just natural, considering the Norn probably had, well, I don't know, the Char tutorial area is pretty big as well. I guess the Char one might be better, to be honest, with Duke Barradin's vault and the whole opening area. But yeah, all of this we could have already been playing when we were in the tutorial, because it's quite a large space that they have you travel through, going on your hunts, learning what it is to do Norny things. Unfortunately, with the later game updates, it all happens very quickly now, and you don't really have to explore very far around these fields, but it is all sort of doubling up, and you get to see this area during the Great Hunt. I've always liked the idea of, in one of the more recent Living World episodes, particularly now in the Icebrood Saga, where in theory there was going to be a lot of Norn stuff, and so far I'm not sure how much I've seen. I mean, there obviously is a lot of Norn stuff in the Icebrood Saga, don't get me wrong. But I've always liked the idea of the Great Hunt coming back. It's supposed to be an annual thing, after all. And seeing what kind of great beast could end up in this region. It would be very cool if at the end of Icebrood Saga, assuming, you know, we deal with the dragon and so on, that maybe as a big celebration the Great Hunt returns, and we can do it in this location. I think that would be a really, really good send-off for some kind of big Norn-themed or focused area of content. Yeah, it's funny, you kind of, for a long time I was hoping the Norn would get their own expansion, but now it's sort of looking like, at least for the next several years, they won't be. Instead, they get the equivalent of a Living World release. Anyway, so yes, the starting stuff now is well underway. This event's always been a fun one. You transform into a snow leopard. I like transform hearts, I really do, because they change the game to a certain degree. They get you thinking. But they can also be frustrating if you're in that place, and I'm no stranger to this, where you're just trying to rush through map completion. You don't care about your own entertainment anymore. You're just trying to get you know, a gift of exploration or something for a legendary or whatever your reward motivation is. And as soon as you click into that space of being motivated by the rewards rather than the experience, hearts like this suddenly get really annoying. Because like, oh, I've got to learn what all of the skills are, which was the one that I can use to seek enemies out, which was the one that did the most damage or moved me the best. Because a lot of these skills that were implemented in 2012, they have 2012 balance to them, and they're a lot slower and they're a lot clunkier. Like, look at that leap there. We get some pretty good value out of it there, but in general, you know, you kind of stick in place and then you jump maybe only a limited distance unless the target you have was at the right space. So it can be really frustrating to experiment with skills when we're in the game now where we expect everything to be really smooth and really comfortable and really easy. I think that heart's not too bad because you can just press F to like shake down bushes and stuff. You don't actually have to use the abilities, even though that's also possible. So it's pretty nice. So here we're in a little Dredge Mine. I actually think it might have been a mistake for Arenanet to add a Dredge Mine so early to the Wayfarer Foothills experience, because there's so much Dredge Mine stuff in the game. It's a bit like, this is like the Centaur thing. It's like, there's probably too much of this. At least these areas are really beautiful and ominous and grim and spooky. Like, I love the pipes. I love the colour in places like this. And climbing along this pipe's always been fun, even way back at launch, the idea of getting a Vista by going on something that was so big and long. When you're at the very, very, very beginning of your adventure, you see that and it looks quite intimidating. Don't forget, back at launch, there was no FOV slider either. So all of these things had a much greater sense of scale. The other thing is, we're running all the way into this super deep cave. I mean, look at the minimap. To get that one Vista. If the Vista wasn't telegraphed on the map UI, you might not know that there was such a huge chunk of the map. But we're only getting the one Vista and we're leaving. At launch, that wasn't true. That, Smolensk was the location of the now deleted heart. So they got rid of one in there and instead went for a new one with the rabbit chasing. And for the life of me, I can't see why the rabbit chasing is so much... Well, no, I can. The rabbit chasing is more interesting, for sure. This is actually an example of a place where I think the new player experience made the game a little bit more complex. Like, the idea of carrying the bags of feed and hiding from the rabbits and focusing your environment, that's more compelling than just kill a ton of dredge, right, and break stuff with the dredge. So they actually expanded on Wayfarer, where so many other maps kind of felt like they lost a lot of their spirit with all of their mechanics being simplified. On this one, possibly a little bit of an improvement. So, yeah, moving along to the southern wall. There's not much more to say about Smolensk, really, now that there's nothing in there. You get to go to some locations that will double up in the personal story later. This heart's always been a shame to me. It's got a really cool mechanic of running with the wolves, and the idea is you're in the pack with them. Unfortunately, they don't really patrol too far, so you don't really feel like you're hunting through, like, this boreal landscape and stuff. They're just kind of on these open fields. But it's a cool little interaction you don't see much in Guild Wars 2. The devs could have used that a lot more. Stick with the area, don't fall out of it. You know, kind of like a reverse escort almost. Like, they're escorting you, and your job is to stay in the ring as it weaves and winds, and maybe the ring could expand or shrink. The devs could have done all kinds of stuff with that all over Corteria. But that wolf event is the only one I can really remember they went with it. And worst of all, when you're playing that heart, you get very little value, very little benefit out of staying with the wolves. Like, it ticks the most tiny little increment. I'm not actually sure what the numerical value is for heart progress. I don't know if it's like a number 0 to 100, as in, you know, 0% to 100%, or whether it's like 0 to 1,000, and they can give you 1,000th of a heart progress. But whatever that wolf thing is, every time it ticks, it feels that slow and that little. And so obviously players are just going to optimize. They're just going to go for their own efficiency. And it turns out killing stuff and breaking crates is way quicker. Like, it's completely imbalanced. So what is a really fun and unique interaction is pretty much overlooked. And there's no real need to do it. So here in the Gruul Cave, we get to do the graffiti again, and it's funny because the graffiti imagery, if you saw my previous episode in Queensdale, you'll see that it's actually the exact same as the Centaur graffiti supposedly was before. I think some of you guys might have, when we were talking about Beetleton before and the Centaurs being in there and leaving the graffiti, you might have sort of questioned, what is the graffiti meant to show? Don't look too deeply into it. It's just meant to be like generic monstrous stuff. That heart, in my mind, is always one of the easiest ones in the game. It's the one I tend to zerg to straight away when I start Wayfarer. It looks like we've done a little bit more of an efficient route this time, where we've kind of circled around the outer perimeter, so we get to it later. But yeah, that to me is like one of the definitive first hearts in this whole map, if not the Raven Riddle Shrine one. Which, by the way, did we do yet? Nice little hidden underwater cave there as well, by the way. Lots of maps do that. In Metrica, I never pointed it out, but there was actually a cool little hidden cave that you can swim into there as well, but no map completion objectives. And this area of the Jotun I always think is going to be a heart location, but it's not. It's just that one of the early personal story asks you to take place there. But yeah, there's a Riddle heart. Well, we get to do the bear one here first. So next to us, there is a hole in the roof of this cave. And one thing that always very much sticks out in my mind from the start of launch times, and I think was a great story that really exemplifies why people loved exploring in Guild Wars 2. This cave right above us right now, there's a hole. And if you're just wandering along, particularly if you're just making a beeline for map objectives, you can very easily fall down the hole. And at launch, where people weren't used to all the mount movement and speed and the bigger camera settings and stuff, falling down that hole was actually really quite a thrill. You can see now, as a Guild Wars 2 player of 2020, that it doesn't feel like a big drop. And you can kind of get a sense that you're probably going to take like 2/3 full damage from that. It's not really, you know, you're kind of so used to the game that it's not exciting. But falling down that hole was a real thrill for people. And I remember, first of all, multiple stories about it. But in particular, one guy told his story about playing Guild Wars 2, playing as a Norn and loving the game. And he fell down that hole. And he wrote it really quite eloquently, I guess, because it blew up. It was like one of those stories that really, really convinced, I think, people of the nature of Guild Wars 2's like open world exploration. And that seems like such a small, insignificant treat now, you know, in accordance with the rest of the game. And I think that just shows how the rest of it's all kind of expanded forwards. You know, even views and stuff like this, vistas like this is really profound, really incredible, really high. But, you know, is dwarfed by some of the other stuff that we've experienced that somehow doesn't get as much fanfare, you know. I could talk a lot about the psychology of that, but I guess I won't. And why I'm so conservative with things when it comes to games. So yeah, I guess I never provided any commentary about the Raven Riddle heart. It's again another unfortunate heart where if you just kill some of the skelk in the area and you break their nests, you can finish it really quickly, or you just deliver the eggs. It's really quick, But because it's one of the first things in the game, and people are more likely to still be reading dialogue, I actually think a lot of people do the dialogue part of that, which is that there are these riddles you need to answer. Try to get them right. You get a lot of heart progress if you do. I think you only need to answer like 5 correctly, and they're all very simple riddles. But I really live and die for those kinds of hearts in the game. Anyway, where you get to talk a lot. I was super happy to see that Path of Fire, the expansion, kind of returned to a lot of stuff like that. I think that's a time where Arenanet noticed the strength from the core experience and really brought it back. You know, it's similar to in Queensdale with the Ettins and so on. So yeah, we just passed some Jotun runestones. They're really cool artifacts that sort of hint at much deeper stories about the nature of the Elder Dragons and the ancient race and what happened during the last cycle. The Jotun actually have a ton. You know how I said when we were in Caledon Forest that the Sylvari were handled really well for lore and stuff, and they felt really, really special? I actually think that the Jotun were handled really well in the Norn areas as well. You know, there's multiple personal story steps, lots of characters around, loads of like little things to hint at in the environment. And unfortunately, I don't think the devs wrote too much to the story, because most of them just rehashed the same information about the Jotun destroying themselves and so on, and some deliberate conflicting pieces of information about the nature of magic. I wish they'd gone a bit further, but yeah, they tend to be handled really, really, really well in this map. And the existence of Jotun runestones in the Wayfarer Foothills is totally fine, because they didn't exist in Guild Wars 1, and well, none of this was Guild Wars 1 traversable. That nice little benefit doesn't really translate later on. Like when we go to maps like Dredgehaunt Cliffs and stuff, you're going to find all these giant Jotun runestones everywhere that were not in the lore before, so they've just kind of popped up, but they're supposed to have been there for thousands of years, not just 250. But I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So yeah, throwing snowballs, I guess the fastest way to deal with that, if there's no events. There's some nice events with bears attacking and so on. Also, the water we just walked up past on the bridge, there's actually an underwater cave connecting these northern areas of the map to these sort of opening cell, the starter cell, shall we say, that I've been trying to describe in all these videos. And they're very claustrophobic, very cluttered, lots of like kelp and seaweed and stuff in there. I think that was a location where I once upon a time was grinding on Trident Slayer achievements. And in fact, that wasn't too long ago either. I think I was doing that on Necromancer, who gets a lot of nice AoE for tagging all the weak things. A particularly dangerous area at launch here against all these Sons of Svanir. Nowadays, not too bad. We were smart enough here, I guess, to kill all of the random additional enemies and then go for the hero challenge. Nice little example of another player racing through the game there. Griffin swoops down, lands next to us, destroys the thing, and then flies off again. The Griffin not having to worry about any of the terrain or anything like that. Sorry, it wasn't a Griffin, it was a Sky Scale, which to an even greater degree in some senses doesn't have to worry about the terrain. Griffin's kind of amazing on this map. And I like the cinematic element of another player swooping in and dealing with that stuff. I just sort of mourn the loss of meaningful experiences in these areas. But, you know, it's been many years. I understand all the arguments here, guys. I've had them many times. I understand the idea that it's been many years. People are kind of over it. So, let's just get rid of it. I just find it hard to let things go. Anyway, we move up. We get the crafting outpost. This one, funnily enough, is really not that special. It's just a Lion Guard outpost, really. At least with the other ones, it wasn't the Lion Guard providing the base of operations. It was, you know, a human settlement or an Asura settlement. The most recent Lion Guard haven was further away. But for the Norn, they don't have a settlement. It's just a Lion Guard haven. That's kind of fitting to the Norn, I think, in a way. They're supposed to be very nomadic. They're supposed to be very, you know, agrarian to an extent. They're supposed to be quite isolated. They don't found big colonies very regularly. Hoelbrak is supposed to be a bit of an aberration rather than the norm. So maybe it's cool that, you know, everything feels very isolated and distant in this map, and it's the Lion Guard that have to step in to provide a base of operations for people to be crafting and stuff once they're actually out in the field. Like these little camps and things out in the fields now abandoned feel more Norn-like to me than anything else. Of course, these being associated with the Sons of Svanir, who we will find in abundance as we go north. So let's talk about that lake over there. That lake is the location of a meta event that is a world boss people go to very frequently. Probably one of the worst optimized parts of the game. When people talk about Guild Wars 2 optimization, you know, the game's coming to Steam soon, so there's a lot of talk about optimization. And people make these, like, thick, sweeping statements about, like, the game's optimization. There's no such thing as how well the game is optimized on, like, a broad level. Some areas run really smoothly and really beautifully, and some areas run worse, right? There's a very big difference to playing Caudicus's Manor to playing World versus World. So, anyway, you need to talk more precisely about where it is that you're experiencing frame drops and why. This area, for years, was hands down the worst frame optimized place in the game. I mean, I've certainly had worse network issues in World versus World, but my god, it's something about the storm and the players that would arrive there and the animations for the actual creature was just nuts. It would drag even the strongest rigs to their knees. Imagine playing with no culling, lots of shadows on, and don't forget when the game came out there weren't really any great culling settings, though that meant that everyone was culled away all the time, if I remember rightly. It was just horrendous, really horrendous. But I do have very fond memories of this. Back during my Guild Wars 1 Let's Play, while I was in the Eye of the North regions, I actually went to one of the pre-release games conventions that had a demo to play Guild Wars 2. And so this was 2011, while I have a ton of nostalgia for the Queensdale demo and the Blaze Ridge demo, and I've probably watched every video that's ever existed about those multiple times just to see how bizarre and different the game was. For me personally, the only time I played this game pre-release at a convention was the Wayfarer demo. It was this map. You'd think I'd have really strong, like, connection with this map for that reason. Maybe I'd want to play a Norn or something, because I actually got to experience this one. But it's not true. I really don't have a super deep connection with this. But I do have an interesting story. When I played this, I went into it with a very specific mindset, because there'd been a fairly obscure interview with the game director at the time, before I got to the convention. And they had said that here on the Wayfarer Foothills, a new map to explore for the day, if you got far enough in, there would be a meta event with a frozen lake that when the meta event triggered, the lake would freeze and you'd fight a boss. And that was the phrasing, and so it sounded like this really epic event, because don't forget, at that time, events were all about how they could change the world. The devs were desperate to convince the community that events were the way forward, not traditional questing. So how can events change the world? How can they affect things? And they used this phrase that it would freeze the lake. And then the boss would, and it would even, so the suggestion was this would allow you to get to a house on an island in the middle of a lake or something like that. And we've been talking on the forums about it, but no one had seen it, even though in theory we could have seen it because it was in one of the playable demos. It was kind of the equivalent of, you know, when they did the Blaze Ridge demo, the devs did all these guided tours where they made sure to spawn the Shatterer and show you the Shatterer. So we had loads of footage of it. And it sounded like there was another Shatterer scale thing, a world boss, in one of these demos, but no one had seen it. So just imagine how secret and exciting and amazing that sounded. So I kind of went on a mission. I wanted to get a YouTube video for you guys of it. And so that's why I was really incentivized to play here. Came to do the Wayfarer thing. Turned out, first of all, it was not how they described it at all. Yeah, the lake kind of freezes because a big frozen storm comes in, but it doesn't transform a body of water into ice. In fact, we have seen that nowhere in Guild Wars 2, ever, even in the Icebrood Saga, and I can think of multiple places in the current story where that would be such a badass thing to see, dynamically spawning ice that you can stand on and do things. And we know that they've got such good code in there at the moment. They can do so many amazing things. Through Season 4, they had all these incredible boundaries that they pushed with the game engine. But we just have never seen that. So not only was it a bit of a disappointment, but I was not able to get there in the first place. It was really hard. Remember, we only had 40 minutes, and it was really hard to go through create a character, go through the tutorial, level up enough, and explore to the extent that you could get up there. Even just getting out of the starting cell of hearts and so on, you couldn't realistically do in 40 minutes. And I know that's amazing considering we're not even 40 minutes into the video yet, and here we are. This video is almost like living proof that you could do it, but only in the game of today and the balance of today. Back then, it just wasn't a thing, especially for like relative newbies such as myself. In fact, I remember very specifically, there's a narrow pass with a bridge going over it that a dynamic event can spawn where Sons of Svanir stand around and block your progress, and that event was up when I got there on the demo, and I was low level and I was just trying to rush through, but I couldn't get past them, and I guess no one could get past them really. We were all low level and we were all getting kicked out just about before we would be able to deal with the threat. I remember I had talked to some of the devs at the convention, at the station area, asking for their permission to record all of this, and I did get permission, but then after I was seen hooking my hard drive up, one of the community managers of the day freaked out at me and kind of scolded me. I felt like a little schoolboy that was in trouble, and I appreciate that the position they were in. They probably thought I was trying to steal data or something, I don't know, because obviously the guy that gave me permission didn't confirm with the other people that that's what I was doing, and they probably had something more specific set up for real press, so to speak. I'm just some loser on YouTube. And so they kind of kicked me off, and I didn't get kicked off of playing, but I wasn't allowed to record, and I felt really embarrassed and nervous about it, because these guys were like my heroes, and I'd been shouted at by them, and it was a little bit of a shame. And later as well, I did speak to the one and only Colin Johansson at the time. This was the first time I ever met him. I think on the subsequent times I met him, I don't think he remembered this, but I had been one of those geeks standing in like a little circle, trying to get his attention, you know, just to ask him about this thing with the lake. And he did confirm to me that the event was in there, but I never managed to get there. I remember him very specifically saying it's probably too hard to reach. And so it was a bit of a disappointment all around. I actually have, if you go dig into my channel after this video's over, I have still from 2011 the update video I did for everyone in the middle of my Eye of the North Let's Play, where I was saying, I'm sorry I never got any of the footage, guys. And I told this story from back then. Here I am, many years later, doing the same thing. How far we have come, guys. So anyway, to talk a little bit more about the map completion here, we're now on the border of Cragstead. There's all of these nice smoke vents and stuff coming out. These were all added in Living World Season 1. In fact, the very first Living World update ever where you could actually like earn stuff was here. They filtered in some sneaky random little updates for Living World Season 1 initially, just like the War in Kryta updates from Guild Wars 1. But when they finally added an achievement and stuff and things to do, it was here. And I remember, I still consider this one of the bigger missteps of Guild Wars 2. I remember the epic Zergs, the crazy quantity of players, the number of like overflow servers that there were, of people enthusiastic about finally getting some new content here. And it was the fixing signs update where you just kind of ran around, pressed F, fixed signs, you found a couple of bodies, you got an achievement called Veteran, I think it was. And I remember the immense disappointment, because that was, you really got to put your best foot forward first when you're telling everyone about this brand spanking new thing, Live in World Season 1, and how it's going to change the nature of MMO updates and all this kind of stuff. And then it was an update I think that people really wanted more from. I mean, I think many times over this game's history, Arenanet underestimated what they'd built in terms of a game with the freedom that it has, with the repair freedom, with the travel freedom of waypoints and stuff. It means that content that would be fairly meaningful in other games just doesn't work in this game because it's too quick to zerg around to and to complete. And it puts so much more pressure on this studio to make stuff. Before the audience will say, hey, that was meaningful, they have to hit so many bars and work so much harder than in these other MMOs that do not give you so much freedom. So we're now in the location of the second meta event, the Assault on Svanir's Dome. Unlike all the other starter maps, I would actually say both meta events are fairly well realized in the Wayfarer Foothills. Both of them I feel have a place. They're not both world bosses, admittedly, like full-on world bosses, but this one up here is cool, and I like to come here and deal with this. It certainly feels a lot more complete than, say, the Beetleton meta event or the Ghost events that take place in Ascalon, which really don't even feel like a meta in some ways, you know. Maybe Caledon had some good multiple meta stuff going on. Hold on, wait, you've got the Worm. What was the other meta? Did we talk about that in the previous video? Anyway, yeah, as I said, there'd be more Sons of Svanir up in these northern reaches. There certainly are. That event we did a second ago with the Dolly Axe is a weird one where basically we just had to spam F on the calf to throw the net at it, and you get a little bit more progress over and over. I have to admit, I've never really understood how that one worked. And maybe this was like one of the last maps that I ended up doing world completion on, and I was a bit more blasé about learning stuff, you know. I was starting to get a lot more focused on just get the reward at the end. I haven't mentioned it yet, but one of the things that was really compelling about world completion back in the day wasn't just leveling up, but actually crafting materials you got. I remember like the bulk 40 silk, or 40 linen, or 40 cloth, or whatever. You know, maybe you got ores or whatever. I remember that actually being really meaningful to me. In a world where the economy was very different and everyone was crafting those early level mats and stuff, it's an experience we've never had back. And I envy some other online games. They structure themselves such that they have in-game economy resets every now and then. And I really, really want that. I've always wanted that for Guild Wars 2. A chance for everyone to start fresh. All the obnoxious, crazy, bright, flashy skins can stay in the game, but suddenly we're all back to like a noob level. So, you know, the game feels a lot more immersive to travel around, and everyone just kind of races through, and things suddenly have value that didn't have value before. I think there's so much that could be done with that with an economy reset. But Arenanet strikes me as a studio that is very scared of ever taking anything away from the player. I guess through their research, through their metrics over the years, they found the #1 cause of people quitting or not enjoying the game is when they lose stuff. And that's probably true. I think people are very... is covetous the right word? People like to hoard what they have accrued in the game. And if they're not continuing to accrue stuff, if they're not continuing to collect stuff, they immediately become disenfranchised with it. I think people are very, very, very clingy to what they get. Even if they get it through kind of scummy or boring means, and the devs now want to update it and change it, you know. What's theirs is theirs, and they don't want that to be tampered with. It inspires a lot of hate, I think, against the devs and against the product if you take things away. I mean, I would always say that this league thing would be an opt-in experience, but then the question is how many people would really opt in? How many people believe in what I just said, that would be really fun, like sort of a vanilla reset? I believe in it, and certainly in some other games out there they believe in it, but Arenanet, I guess, doesn't. Or doesn't believe in it enough to prioritize that over all the other cool things they can do with the game, like Live in World and, you know, something. We've heard about all kinds of features like World versus World Alliances and the Legendary Armory that after they first announced them, it takes a long time to see any kind of movement. So this thing I'm talking about would be very similar, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, I guess we're now moving down the western flank of the map. I have a lot of memories of this Vista and this area. I don't know why. Was there some living world that had you fight the Sons of Svanir in that little cave down there? I have a lot of memories of them. Maybe it's just on some challenge run where I was playing the game with no dodge roll, or playing the game with no skills, or you know, no heal or no armor or whatever. Maybe I've struggled there at some point. I can't think of why I'd have to be there though. Maybe just trying to get experience. It's kind of sad for me to see that you can get the point of interest for that house without actually fully entering the house, you know. I kind of feel like the radius on some of them should be a lot smaller. But again, the way that a lot of the point of interest were designed and their trigger points and stuff are from a world where they were not on the minimap. So they would have a bigger radius on them because there was no direct, easy telegraph for players. I talked about that a little bit on a previous video. I do want to note as well that in some ways, Arenanet were ahead of the curve by putting all the POIs on the minimap. Now, I played the game where the POIs were not on the minimap, and I know what an experience it was. It was much tougher, as I said, but it was also more gratifying when you found them. But at the same time, we all know what would have happened. People would have just made overlays that put the icons there anyway. Or all it would have really done is introduce this kind of obnoxious, annoying thing where you're constantly having to alt-tab back and forwards to figure out where the objectives are, and then look back in game and then tab. So, and people would have been doing that. So in a way, they're just kind of cutting out the middleman and, you know, perceiving the inevitability and just putting us there anyway, you know. Which is sad, but, you know, I think a lot of MMO design has to do that. You have to think about these things and get the jump. So it looks like it might not be a superior experience, but at the end of the day, it really would have been. So another Dredge Mine. I seem to remember some cool events on this one where, aren't you escorting some guys? Don't you learn a little bit about the dwarves in this one, maybe? It's funny, in the game these days, there are actually dwarves to interact with, Stone Summit to fight and stuff. And I can imagine them fitting in so well in locations like this. Obviously, it wouldn't make any sense from the story here, but there you have it. And looks like we're struggling a little bit to find enemies to kill, possibly due to the fact that there are actually 2 players here this time. I'm not sure what the prototype weapons on the floor do. See, like, look at this. I mean, and with the kill speed is so fast here that Guardian had absolutely no chance to tag it. That Guardian also looked like a genuine new player. That looked like genuine new Guardian armor and the speed they were moving and stuff. That always just makes me so happy when I see genuine new people. The Steam release is going to be so good, guys. It's going to be really, really fun. I'm sure we don't have too much left. This is a really interesting heart. The to help the Jotun with their trading game. So the idea here is you find some junk on the ground, you give it to a Jotun, and some of them will pay you for it in their runestones. But you know, there's like 5 Jotun you can pick from, 4 Jotun you can pick from. One of them doesn't want it at all. One of them will pay you a pittance. One of them will also pay you a pittance. The other guy will pay you a lot. And then once you've got the runestones, you can spend the runestones on the Jotuns, like artifacts, like old swords and weird stuff, and then you can trade it amongst them, basically gaining value. I love this. There's an episode of The American Office, which I've been watching recently, in which there's like basically a big garage sale, and one of the characters starts with like a candle and trades their way up to the most valuable thing in the whole room. And it's really fun to watch, and it's really cool, and I like that idea of like bartering in a fun way. And this heart always makes me think of that, and it's kind of a similar thing. I think this heart probably predates that episode of the TV show. Well, it definitely does, because I think that's quite a late season thing. Anyway, yeah, and then once you've got enough runestones, which, by the way, the act of trading gives you value. Once you've got enough, you can speak to the Seraph there and hand them all in. I'm actually really impressed with TechZoon here in the footage, because that was extremely efficiently done. I am aware that the Tekkit overlay can give you like an exact route of what to pick up and when, in what order, and what to give all the creatures. You can really invalidate all of the experience by doing that. I'm not sure that's what they're doing there. And finally, the hot spring, which is a pretty fun little event there. We're actually right next to, you can see an unforkable area, which is the jumping puzzle of the map, the Shaman's Rookery. Also fun, but no reason to go in there for the map comp. So there you have it. That is the Wayfarer Foothills, the last of the starter maps. We're going to move deeper into the game now. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Thanks to TechZoon. See you next time.